Hello, this is Bob Pellerin, CTO Bob. Today I'll do something a little different. I get a lot of questions regarding financial matters. Please, first of all, understand I'm not a financial advisor, and I can certainly share with you my thoughts on the economy. I do write for articles from time to time. Notably, I write for the MontrealAnalyst.com and CanadianMineAnalysis.com. As the names may suggest, I am primarily interested and am investing in precious metals. I want to answer some of the questions, and I haven't been doing any YouTube videos on the economy, but I thought, why not at this point? It's the end of the year. It's 2020 has been kind of disastrous for everyone. One of the emails I got yesterday actually was asking me what my thoughts were on stocks. Should people continue to keep their money, for example, in the top stocks? It's very hard for anyone, including myself, to predict the future. Things are in flux. There's always things that get added to the complexity of the markets. So for anyone to say, hey, Tesla's doing great numbers, they're going to go up because they've sold so many more cars, or Apple sold so many more iPhones, things like pandemics happen, things like recessions can happen, wars, anything, conflicts can happen at an instant notice. So all of a sudden there's something that happens in Europe and it affects the whole market. If you've seen what I've written before, I've written for things like the Morgan Report. So my forecast rate, I'll kind of give that up right now. It's not looking great. So what do I generally look at? Well, my big thing is the preservation of value. If you go back in history again and again, money systems tend to fail. And not tend to fail, they eventually fail. I mean, it might take 100 years, might take more, depends on whether you're talking about small countries or if you're talking about the Roman Empire. With that in mind, part of my theory anyways, or part of my mindset, is that money is based on faith. It's based on everyone agreeing that it has value. And it's a good way, it's a good medium of exchange for goods. If someone 100 years ago took all their life saving, $1,000 back then, put it in a suitcase, buried it in the backyard, and you find it after 100 years and you pull it out, you would say, wow, I got $1,000. Let's assume for some reason that the money itself is not so rare that it has an artistic value, if I can put it that way, or historical value. But if it's just at face value, $1,000 today is not what it would have been back then. So if you owned a house in Weimar, Germany, for example, and you had a 6-bedroom house and it was $100, well, you're not going to buy anything for $100 house-wise nowadays. So if you put that into perspective, the money as it goes along has a certain amount of inflation and it loses value naturally. Why? Because they keep printing more and more of it. Now, if you had instead buried something like gold back then, because there were no bitcoins, there were no real other stores of value apart from other currencies from other countries. So that money, if it had been gold coins, again, not assuming the gold coins are so special that they gain value because they're unique. If they're just a lump of gold, for example, the value back then of $1,000 would probably end up being, and I didn't research this, but would be multiples of that. So if you had enough gold back then, let's say 10 pieces of gold, and you could have bought 10 nice suits, well, today you'd be able to buy those 10 nice suits. So instead of having a couple $100 back then, now you'd have tens of thousands of dollars for the exact amount. So that's one of the reasons why gold and silver, depending on the country and rarity and so forth, have been used traditionally to store value. I'm going to tell you, as a computer person, you could also look at bitcoins. I'm going to take a bit of a side note here and tell you about my stories about bitcoins, just because I think it's important. By the way, if you like these videos and you'd like more of them, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It's really important for the YouTube algorithms and so forth. It really helps me out, and I am trying to grow my channel and hopefully provide more content for you. So back to my story about bitcoins. Early on, I got very interested, primarily as a computer person. I was interested in the farming. Now, if you don't know much about Bitcoin, I'm going to try to give you a bit of a summary as to what in the world the Bitcoins are about. I'm actually not going to give you too much history, but what it is in order for the transactions to happen, there has to be a back end. For example, if you were to spend on a debit card or credit card, when you go and purchase, there are systems in the back end that will figure out if you have the cash. If you have a debit card, your bank will actually be consulted and they'll say, does Bob have the $14 to buy this, whatever it is that you're purchasing? And then the bank would agree to it, okay it, and then the merchant, the shop where you're shopping, would get the okay, and out would pop up a receipt, and the bank would be aware of the transaction, take it out of your account. Now with Bitcoins, that doesn't exist. Instead, they have something called blockchain. But since the blockchain is not owned by a single entity, there's no Bank of America or Royal Bank of Canada, wherever you are, there's nothing in the background to do that. What they have is they have a system, and it's called mining, and they'll have systems. It could be a computer with a very good video card. It could be something called, for example, an ant miner, something I played around with quite a lot at the beginning. And what they do is they will actually sit there and wait for transactions. So as you go and purchase, or you want to basically give some of your Bitcoins, or if you want to purchase some Bitcoins, the actual list in the background, this blockchain actually is a ledger which will track how much you have. So if you were to try to purchase something with Bitcoins, then your purchase would go and consult multiple computers that would check this ledger and figure out if you do indeed have the Bitcoin, and then would subtract it. So there's a transaction that goes on. And so that the mining, in effect, is the part that the banking system or the credit card systems in the back do presently. So that's about as dumbed down as I think I can put it. And hopefully nobody calls me out and hates me for dumbing it down to that level. But this is kind of, if you want to understand it, that's roughly what it equates to. So my story, and the reason I bring this up is I had some mining. I was really looking at how to design better ant miners, I was tweaking around with things, water cooling, and I'm not going to get into it, but if anybody technical is out there, they'll understand that people like me like to tinker around with things and try to get things more efficient, cool things more, see if you can get more throughput out of them. And so at the end of the day, I was producing some Bitcoin. And so these Bitcoins at first were in Europe in an account there, and the account got hacked. So that went away. In fact, my account at that time had been moved around a bit, but I ended up with an account at NiceHash, and then that was gone. So then I dealt with another firm in Canada because we started stuff. I had a couple of clients who would asked me to consult on Bitcoin. And along the way, I'd been introduced to someone out of Vancouver, BC, who had an exchange. And so ended up investing. And long story short, I had some funds and some Bitcoins over there. And it turned out to have been a fraud, but it was very well done. The gentleman was very convincing. Everything was online, so you could track, I guess, nothing since he was basically a fraud. But the point I'm getting at is the challenge I have with Bitcoin. It's not the technology. It's not the concept of it. Is there's a certain rarity to Bitcoins. They're harder and harder to mine, so you make less and less of a percentage. So basically, as someone who handles the transactions as a miner, I get a small cut of the transaction for my effort. And so if that becomes unproductive, or in my case, like I said, even if as an owner of Bitcoin, I put them somewhere and you get hacked, you get conned, it's a very Wild West type of environment. There are ways you could put your Bitcoins in a cold wallet, something that is offline. I've had people lose their computers, their hard drive goes, and there goes their Bitcoin. So it's a lot of these stories, and the point is it's not as black and white as you would think. It's not as safe out there as you would think. Anybody breaks into your computer, they'll take your Bitcoin potentially. There's encryption, there's all these things, but at the end of the day, it's not quite like having a lump of gold under your pillow, which is, by the way, not something I actually recommend literally, but the idea is if you have a piece of gold hidden in a tin can in your backyard, if they find it in 20 years, it still has value, it's still there. Can somebody steal it? Well, yes, there's nothing perfect, but the point I'm getting at is it's an alternative. And at the end of the day, really it boils down to you have to diversify somewhat. Even if you thought the end of the world was coming, I don't think anyone in their right mind would want to just sit on a pile of gold or a pile of silver, because you'll still end up having to buy food. You'll still have to probably pay for your taxes if you own a property or house. If you want to, so I mean, there's all this income taxes. At the end of the year, the government's not necessarily going to want gold and silver. I understand some. I think the state of Idaho allows for payment in precious metals. Go check your local laws. But the point is it's very limited. And Bitcoin's the same thing. Some people are saying, well, I could use Bitcoin, so I can just go off and buy from Dell. I don't even know if they still do that. But at the end of the day, it's not widely accepted. It's not that liquid, so you still need some cash. Now, back to the whole economy part of view is, at the end of the day, there is inflation. They are printing more money. With this pandemic, most governments, if I'm not going to say all governments, because I'm sure there's some countries out there not doing it, but if you're living in the US, you're living in Canada, for example, you're getting checks. You were getting checks. In the US, for example, there was $1,200 US sent to each citizen. Some of them were not even in the United States at all. They got checks. If you're in Canada and UK and whatever, you just got a check. I heard of funny stories of people who had studied in the U.S. and for months went back home and got a check mailed to India or mailed to somewhere else. So apparently it happens. But the point is there's a lot of money being created with the Federal Reserve. Again, there's a lot of videos on this. There's a lot of explanations as to how the money's created, how the money is multiplied, how the money inflates over time. And there's more and more money. And as this wealth happens, as more and more people have this extra money all of a sudden, they're going to go off and either save it or consume it. And if they're, by consume, I mean they're going to go out and buy things with it. And so it's going to create certain demand, which is what the government's hoping for. The more demand, the more products, the more taxes are paid. And it does this cycle, which is generally good for the economy. However, at the end of the day, if you want to put your thinking caps on, you're going to get to a point where, as an individual, you have to realize, look around you, your neighbors, they're getting checks, or if it's in Canada, some of them are, getting assistance from the government. They're getting $2,000 a month and so forth if they're out of work because of the 19. And so what ends up happening is a lot of people will buy things that are pointless. By pointless, I mean it's good for them, like it's dear to their hearts. But I know people who've bought snowmobiles. I know people who've bought. The point is once this pandemic is over, if there's less jobs, different jobs, lower paying jobs, then you're going to have a certain amount of the population which will now have a real problem keeping up the new toys they've purchased. If you get a brand new large screen TV, but in 2 months you no longer can pay the rent, you've got a different problem. And obviously, at the end of the day, everybody has to worry about their food, their lodging, and their vehicle if they want to be able to go to work and so forth. So that's primarily where that goes. So one of the things that I'd like to throw at you as well is, there's some excellent books out there, because I can talk forever, so I don't want to just continue for hours. But so you can kind of see where I'm going with all this. It's really about diversifying, and it's really about making sure that some portion of your portfolio is sound, will retain value if anything happens. Because as inflation hits, I mentioned Weimar Republic before. I mean, their money devalued. Venezuela devalued. Zimbabwe. There's lots and lots of countries. So it's not that uncommon for the value of money to go down. I mean, things that are concerning me, apart from the pandemic, which is accelerating certain trends and highlighting certain fears that a lot of us had, is the whole point of most of the oil used to be transacted strictly with US dollars, creating a natural stability for it. Now what's happening is there's a lot of trades going on with Russia, with China, for example, and they're no longer buying with US dollars, so the need for that portion of it, that requirement for US dollars, is being taken out of some of the equation. It's not completely done, but we can see the trend. This is where this is going, and this will mean eventually that the US dollar will have to either be enhanced with something, another currency, a basket of currencies. Will they throw in precious metals, gold, silver, into that mix to stabilize things? I don't know. A lot of people seem to think so. I don't see why they would not. I think a lot of the countries will try cryptocurrencies. How well that will work, look, once the government gets involved with cryptocurrencies, I think it takes away a little bit of the risk on one end, meaning that if somebody does take your cryptocurrencies away, if it's legal tender, then there is some recourse. You can, go to the police, go to the bank, there is some kind of structure, natural structure in place for the from the banking point of view that will support you, that will be used to this type of deal, and will have the ability to trace and have the ability to take recourses potentially. I'm not saying it's a sure thing, but it does increase the odds. On the flip side, I've always said the countries and the smaller local governments, for example, have never been good at managing things. If you look at healthcare, if you look at education, if you look at those types of things, it's never perfect. It tends to balloon. It tends to have a large overhead, I guess is the best way that I could put that, so that at first you have some efficiency, and over time it just becomes more bureaucratic. It becomes harder, more paperwork, more and so forth. And so this may take away some of the appeal of the cryptocurrencies, because I think that a lot of the people like the cryptocurrencies in its current state because they feel that it's untouchable by the governments. If you buy a Bitcoin, the Bitcoin can be traded in Canada, the US, anywhere. It's a Bitcoin. So anyone who will accept your Bitcoin will accept it from wherever they are. And the local governments, to some extent, have no real control or ability to stop you from buying or selling your Bitcoins. Gold has been traditionally the same way. If I have a piece of gold, or somebody in the Roman Empire had a piece of gold, you go around, a piece of gold is still a piece of gold in Turkey, as it is in Afghanistan, as it is in the US. It has a value anywhere you go, and any local merchant will accept it as having some value without the need of a government intervention. It's not like if you have a piece of currency from Venezuela or somewhere and try to go to China and try to buy bread with it, they probably will refuse it. So that it makes it more awkward. I'm not saying they accept gold everywhere, but what I'm saying is it's more likely that you will be able to revert a piece of precious metal back into a local currency in the future. Let me leave you with a few ideas. A good friend of mine, David Morgan, who I've written an article for and I've interviewed in the past, wrote a very good book called Second Chance. So if you'd like, go out and get a copy of it. It's very good. There's also, ironically, another book called Second Chance. And this one's okay as well. I'm certainly Mr. Kiyosaki is certainly a well-known author, and I read a lot of these books, and some of the authors, like I said, I just happen to think very highly of David Morgan, and that's one of the reasons he actually gave me this book when I was having a conversation with him. And it's written with David H. Smith as well, whom I've spoken to on a few occasions, and they're great guys. They understand the market very well, and at the end of the day, it's all about protecting what you've already earned and what you have, as well as increasing your potential. Another book that I'd like to point out to Peter Schiff, who've I've spoken to before in the past. This is called The Real Crash, and a lot of these books are there to really tell you about what happens when the wheels come off the market and how you should react. They're not necessarily all perfect, and they can't predict the future either. But on the flip side, the more you read, the more you know, the more you can make up your own mind. And of course, each situation is different. If all you have in spare change at the end of the month is $40, you're going to have a completely different point of view on the economy than someone who has $50,000 every quarter left over as a slush fund. But at the end of the day, it goes with, you need to be comfortable with your lifestyle, and if it makes you happy to have a car, then you shouldn't let people tell you that it's not a great spending. I mean, you need a house to live in and so forth. So what I'm saying is, be yourself. You have to be responsible with your money. They're your decisions. And the more you understand about the economy, and the more you understand about potential market crashes, the more you understand about sound money, so not just currencies, but actual stores of value, the better off you'll be. So I'm not certainly suggesting that you put any or all your money in anything, but you should certainly consider diversifying and thinking, if I have 50 different stocks in my IRA or my 401k or my RSP, depending where you are, or whatever it's called, at the end of the day, they're all denominated most likely in one, potentially two currencies. So if the currency itself goes down 30%, even if you own shares of, say, Intel, and they're still at $100, if your $100 is now worth $70, you've actually lost money, whether it seems like it. Of course, when you're in the country, it's harder to see, and that's another reason why I'd encourage everybody to go out there and try to listen to news that are outside of your area. For example, listen to I'm not going to name necessarily news agencies, but things out of England or Germany or France. A lot of the other countries will have English-speaking newspapers or videos and so forth about their economy, just to find out what's going on. At some point, you're going to realize there's a lot of riots that go unreported. There's a lot of protests. There's a lot of it's all over the map. But as you get a sense for what's happening, what people are they're not happy. There's miscontentment in there, built into a lot of the environments out there. And as these things bubble, governments could fall, there could be, we don't know. And the point is to be prepared for it. Again, thanks for watching. This is Bob Pellerin. I hope this was useful and helpful. And again, you can check out some of my financial websites as montrealanalyst.com and canadianmineanalysis.com if you're interested in those. And please leave comments below. Send me some questions. You can also reach me. You can also, if you're into my technical reviews and unboxings and everything else I've done in the past. I think we're at over 60 videos. I've lost count, but we have quite a few of those. You could also always go to ctobob.com, and on there you have a contact us button. You click on that. It will send me an email. I'll be more than happy to respond to you. Those of you who have sent me emails over time know that I respond. I've done my best to help people out there, either find things or understand certain things. And let me know who you'd like me to talk to in the future, or what subjects you'd like me to cover, and we'll keep going. So wishing everybody a great new year, and hang in there.